He abandoned her after their wedding night and trembled when she entered his mansion with 3 surprises. Hi, beautiful family members, a warm hug from your Alcot Stories channel. Before we begin today's emotional roller coaster, I just want to take a heartfelt moment to pray for you all. May peace enter your homes, may joy fill your hearts, and may you be surrounded with love, blessings, and endless strength in everything you do. Now, my dearest family, I know many of you were waiting for a new story from me, and believe me, it broke my heart not to be able to bring one sooner. I've been ill for the past 2 days, and honestly, I missed you all so much. That's why there was a little gap in uploading. Please remember me in your special prayers. I'm healing slowly, but your love and dua are the medicine I need most. I promise to keep creating magical, powerful, and emotional stories just for you, but I can't do it without you. Please stay with me till the very end of this story. I need your energy, your support, and your motivation now more than ever. Your comments, your likes, your presence. It gives me life and the strength to keep going. And to all my lovely family members who haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? If you love powerful storytelling, deep emotions, and unforgettable twists, hit that subscribe button right now and become part of this beautiful journey with me. So sit back, hold your heart, and let's dive into another unforgettable chapter together, only on Alcot Stories. Liam Carter had seen beauty in every form: runway queens from Paris, swimsuit goddesses from Miami, fashion icons from Milan, but none of them stirred anything in his heart. As the CEO of Carter Modeling Empire, women threw themselves at him daily, each one more dazzling than the last, yet none of them ever reached beyond his carefully guarded surface. His heart was a fortress, built with stone and caution, strengthened by the betrayals of his past and the shallow circles he walked through. On this unusually quiet Wednesday morning, sunlight streamed into his 18th-floor Manhattan office, glinting off the glass walls and casting golden rays over polished oak floors. Liam leaned back in his leather chair, flipping through portfolio after portfolio, his face expressionless, eyes weary of plastic smiles and artificial allure. His assistant had scheduled 6 interviews for the day, all aspiring models eager to join his newest luxury campaign. He expected more of the same: pretty faces, flawless filters, charm built on script. But when the elevator doors slid open at 10:02 a.m., something shifted in the air. The temperature didn't change, but his skin felt it. His breath caught slightly, not out of lust, but a sudden unfamiliar recognition, like his soul sat up and noticed. Zara Wells walked in with the quiet poise of a queen, unaware of her throne. Her skin was the shade of warm mahogany kissed by honey, glowing with an effortless radiance. Her deep brown eyes held centuries of quiet strength, and her braided hair was styled in a crown that spoke of culture, pride, and self-respect. She wasn't trying to seduce the room. She commanded it without a word. Liam stood up unconsciously, caught between awe and disbelief. Dressed in a simple white blouse tucked into high-waisted jeans, Zara looked nothing like the over-polished girls before her, yet somehow more striking than anyone he'd ever seen. She smiled, a small, honest curve of the lips that didn't beg for attention, but offered grace. Liam extended his hand, and when her fingers brushed his palm, something electric pulsed through him. She introduced herself with quiet confidence, her voice a soft melody with a subtle southern lilt. "I'm Zara Wells. Thank you for seeing me." That was all it took. Her name etched itself into his mind, like a song he'd be humming long after she left. As she sat across from him, portfolio resting lightly in her lap, Liam tried to focus on the paperwork, but his eyes kept returning to her face, not out of distraction, but intrigue. She wasn't just beautiful. She was different. There was an honesty in the way she spoke about her journey, a humility in her tone as she admitted she had no agency backing her, just a dream and relentless determination. She shared how she'd worked 2 jobs just to afford the train ticket to New York, how she'd faced rejection after rejection without ever letting it crush her. "People see my skin and assume I'm not polished enough," she said quietly. "But I know I have something to offer beyond the surface." Liam swallowed hard. In an industry where people sold their souls for magazine covers, here sat a woman with more substance in her silence than others had in full interviews. He asked her to stand, to take a few steps for him. She rose gracefully, posture tall, hips swaying with quiet rhythm, not rehearsed, but authentic. Her presence wasn't loud, it was undeniable. As she turned and faced him again, something unfamiliar tugged at his chest. He didn't just want her on the campaign, he needed her in it. But more than that, he wanted to know her. Beyond her photos, beyond her poses, beyond the lights and angles, he wanted to know what made her laugh, what made her cry, what she dreamed about at 2 a.m. The silence in the room grew dense, yet uncomfortable. Liam cleared his throat, pushing Zara's portfolio aside. "You're hired," he said, the words almost slipping out in a whisper. Her eyes widened, shocked. "Just like that?" she asked, blinking. "Just like that," he repeated, his voice firm this time. "You're the face I didn't know I was looking for." She grinned, surprised and humbled, biting her lower lip in disbelief. "Thank you, Mr. Carter." "Liam," he corrected with a smile that was rare on his lips. The moment felt surreal. Something deeper than admiration passed between them. Recognition. Souls that may have met somewhere before this life, finding their way back. Zara rose to leave, and as she walked toward the door, Liam found himself not wanting the moment to end. "Zara," he called gently, just as her hand reached for the doorknob. She turned, her expression curious. "Stay a little longer," he said. "I'd like to know your story." She stepped back into the room, the door clicking shut behind her, and just like that, the world outside faded. That morning, Liam Carter thought he was conducting another model interview. Instead, he met the woman who would unravel his guarded heart, the woman who would redefine his definition of beauty, loyalty, and love. What began as a business meeting quietly transformed into the first spark of something neither of them could name, something deeper, bigger, inevitable. As Zara began to speak again, her voice filled with truth and passion, Liam realized with terrifying clarity that his life had just changed, and he didn't even know it yet. As Zara stepped back into Liam's office, the door closing behind her felt like a soft seal on a fate neither of them had planned. She sat down again, not across the desk this time, but on the small velvet couch by the window, sunlight catching the golden tips of her braids as she tucked one behind her ear. Liam walked over slowly, grabbing 2 glasses of water, not wine, not coffee, just something pure, sumptuous, unpretentious, as if matching the honesty in the air between them. He handed her a glass and took a seat beside her, far enough for space, close enough to feel the invisible pull that had begun to take shape the moment she first said his name. As the minutes unfolded into hours, Zara spoke of her childhood in Georgia, raised by a strong mother and quiet grandparents who taught her the value of pride without arrogance. She described how she used to pose in front of mirrors with a plastic crown, dreaming of New York lights and magazine covers, not for the fame, but to prove that a brown-skinned girl with textured hair and no industry name could be seen as art. Liam listened like a man starved of truth, soaking up every word like it had been crafted only. The city lights flickered like stars trying to compete with the rooftop glow where Liam and Zara sat in silence, their hands barely touching, yet their souls screaming in recognition of something unspoken, something sacred. In that quiet moment, something in Liam shifted permanently, a certainty blooming in his chest that Zara wasn't just passing through his life, she was meant to transform it. Days passed, and what once felt like a slow dance of fate turned into a sprint of conviction. Liam began rearranging his life in quiet ways. He cancelled meetings to walk with her in Central Park, delegated boardroom decisions just to share breakfast with her in bed. He wasn't hiding it anymore. His office door, once a symbol of separation, now stayed slightly open, a signal that he was no longer living behind walls. The team began to notice, whispering in break rooms and elevators, and while many admired the romance blossoming between the powerful CEO and the beautiful rising model, one person watched it all with venom pooling behind her perfect smile. Melanie dressed sharper now, walked taller, laughed louder, doing anything to pull Liam's gaze back, but his eyes were always elsewhere. He saw only Zara. One morning, as Zara laughed while helping Liam adjust a crooked tie before a press shoot, he suddenly cupped her face, looked deep into her eyes, and without preamble said, "Marry me." Her breath caught, Not because she doubted the love, but because of the raw, unfiltered way he'd said it, like his heart had waited too long to ask. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded slowly, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. That night, they danced in his living room barefoot, to no music, just the sound of their laughter echoing off marble floors and modern walls. Wedding preparations began immediately, not because they wanted a spectacle, but because they didn't want to wait another second. Liam chose an elegant vineyard just outside the city. It was intimate, surrounded by rolling hills and candle-lit paths, the kind of place where love could bloom loudly and unapologetically. Zara walked down the aisle in an ivory gown that flowed like liquid silk, her braids pinned back with pearl clips passed down by her grandmother. Liam waited at the altar in a crisp black tuxedo, his heart thundering in his chest, not from nerves, but from awe. As she walked toward him, every memory of his life without her blurred into irrelevance. The guests watched with misty eyes as vows were exchanged, vows not just written on paper, but felt in the trembling of hands, in the way Liam's voice cracked when he promised never to doubt the miracle she was. Zara's vows spoke of hope, of second chances, of being seen beyond the surface, and Liam's tears betrayed the strong exterior he often wore in boardrooms. They sealed it with a kiss so gentle it felt like a whisper to the universe, and for a moment, time bent around them. Melanie stood in the back, her hands clenched into fists beneath her designer clutch, face frozen in an emotionless mask. She wore white that day, not out of innocence, but defiance, and not a single person missed the irony. After the ceremony, champagne flowed, laughter echoed, and Liam didn't let go of Zara's hand for a second. Their wedding photos weren't about poses, they were about moments. Zara resting her head on his shoulder, Liam whispering something into her ear that made her eyes sparkle, the way they looked at each other like the world had melted away. That night, instead of a grand ballroom reception, they returned to his penthouse, stripped of makeup and formality, wrapped in each other's arms. The city stretched beneath them, unaware that high above its chaos, two hearts had found home in each other. Zara lit candles around the room, their soft glow reflecting in the windows as Liam pulled her close, not with urgency, but with reverence. They shared their first night as husband and wife in a room filled with soft laughter, warm kisses, and the kind of intimacy that required no words, only the trust of being fully seen, fully chosen. Zara's hands memorized the curve of his back, Liam's lips traced the line of her shoulder, and together they explored not just bodies, but a bond deeper than any physical touch. It was a night woven with tenderness, with whispered promises, with unspoken fears surrendered at the altar of their love. Outside, the city moved on. Cars honked, people dined, skyscrapers blinked. But inside that penthouse, time stood still. And far away, in her apartment, Melanie stared at a glass of wine she hadn't touched in hours, her untouched phone beside her, heart pounding with a bitterness that had turned cold. Liam hadn't called. He hadn't said goodbye. He hadn't even noticed her absence. Her place in his life, once so carefully crafted, had been replaced by a woman who never begged for love, but was given it freely. Melanie's reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, hollow, and as she stared into the night, something hardened within her, jealousy now fully evolved into something darker. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed a message not to Liam, but to someone who owed her a favor that would shatter everything Zara thought was real. But upstairs, in the penthouse, Liam held Zara as she drifted into sleep, unaware that the love they had sealed with vows and kissed beneath stars was now the target of envy, dressed as revenge. As midnight approached, the sounds of distant traffic faded into the velvet silence of the penthouse, and the only light in the room came from flickering candles and strings of soft fairy lights that twinkled like stars caught in golden webs above them. Liam closed the door gently behind him, his eyes never leaving Zara, who stood at the center of the room like a living dream, barefoot on the cold marble floor, wrapped in a delicate ivory silk gown that shimmered with every breath she took. Her braids cascaded gently down her shoulders, and her deep brown eyes, wide with wonder, searched his face not for lust, but for the kind of safety only love could promise. Liam approached her slowly, reverently, like a man afraid to wake from a dream too beautiful to be real. He took her hand in his, pressing a soft kiss to her fingers, his lips lingering, as if to imprint the moment on his soul. "You look like a poem," he whispered, his voice husky and low, as if anything louder would disturb the magic hanging between them. Zara smiled shyly, her cheeks glowing, not from makeup, but from something deeper, something tender and raw that came only from being fully cherished. Without music, they began to sway slowly, his arms around her waist, hers resting on his chest, feeling the steady thump of the heart that now beat only for her. Their bodies moved in quiet rhythm beneath the golden lights, two souls entangled in a dance that had waited lifetimes to begin. No words were needed, their breath, their closened ears. Their locked gazes spoke volumes. Liam's hands moved gently over her back, not with hunger but with reverence, like she was a gift unwrapped not in haste, but in awe. He told her how the moment he first saw her, something in him had known, even before logic, before hesitation, before fear. Zara looked up into his eyes, her voice barely a whisper as she told him that he made her feel like she was no longer fighting the world alone. They laughed softly between their sentences, recalling how awkwardly he had spilled his water at her first shoot, how she had tripped in heels and still made it look like art. These little fragments stitched into their story, reminding them that love wasn't just built on big promises, but in quiet stumbles and shared laughter. Liam brushed a curl from her forehead, his thumb resting at her temple, memorizing her features like a painter studying a masterpiece. Zara reached up, her fingers tracing the faint scar on his chin he'd once hidden with stubble, and kissed it gently, making him close his eyes, overwhelmed by the sensation of being touched with such intention. They sank slowly onto the plush rug near the fireplace, wrapped in the warmth of each other's presence. Liam whispered dreams into her ear, of slow mornings, future children, a cabin by the sea, quiet holidays with no cameras, no press, no expectations. Zara smiled, her head resting against his shoulder, telling him she'd never imagined being this deeply seen, this wholly held, without having to prove her worth. He told her she'd already changed the way he saw the world, that his once silent, sterile apartment now echoed with purpose simply because she breathed inside it. Their fingers intertwined, their breaths mingled in the softest kisses, each one tender, meaningful, unhurried. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her collarbone, each touch a vow of devotion spoken without words. They lay together on a bed that seemed to float on clouds, silk sheets cool against their skin, hearts pounding gently in sync. Liam held her like she was the most sacred thing he'd ever touched, his arms creating a world where nothing could harm her. Zara traced lazy circles on his chest with her fingertip, whispering secrets she had never dared say aloud before. Fears, dreams, memories she had buried until now. And Liam listened like a man hearing the language of stars. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside their cocoon of light and quiet laughter, time became irrelevant. They made no promises for forever because in that moment, forever was already unfolding around them. Liam's voice cracked when he told her she made him believe in softness again, in hope without conditions. Zara, her lashes damp with emotion, told him he had rewired her belief in love, that she no longer felt like someone passing through the background of someone else's story. They wrapped themselves in each other, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, skin to skin and heart to heart, until the lines between where one ended and the other began blurred beautifully. There was no rush, no firestorm of lust, just waves of affection, of belonging, of emotional intimacy that ran deeper than physical closeness ever could. They kissed like explorers navigating a new land, slow and deliberate, learning one another's pace, pausing to laugh, to breathe, to hold still and just feel. Liam ran his fingers down her arms, marveling at the goosebumps he caused, and Zara cupped his face, holding him like he was both powerful and fragile. They spent hours in each other's arms, not chasing a climax, but cultivating connection. The moon shifted in the sky as Zara finally fell asleep, curled beside him, her hand resting over his heart. Liam didn't sleep for a while. He just stared at her in awe, gently stroking her hair, letting the quiet peace of the moment wash over him. He had never felt more grounded, more alive. He whispers, "Ed," barely audible, "thank you for choosing me," and kissed her temple once more. And as dawn crept in through the blinds, casting pale light over a night made sacred by love, neither of them knew that just floors below them a message had already been sent. A storm now slithering toward their joy, ready to strike with fangs of betrayal. But for now, in the quiet hush of their first morning as husband and wife, they were untouched, unshaken, and deeply blissfully lost in the belief that their love was invincible. As dawn tiptoed into the bedroom and soft golden light spilled through the sheer curtains, Liam lay awake, still wrapped in the memory of Zara's warmth from the night before, the laughter, the promises, the whispered dreams echoing softly in his heart. The sweet scent of her perfume lingered on the pillows, and he turned to watch her figure disappear into the shower, humming a tune, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to erupt. The calm was shattered when his phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand. 4 messages, 4 videos, no sender. Just silence and anticipation that made his fingers tremble as he unlocked the screen. He hesitated for a second, heart pounding, a strange pit opening in his stomach. He clicked on the first video, and what he saw made his breath vanish. There was Zara, his Zara, laughing in another man's arms, her smile not reserved for Liam, but for someone else, someone whose face was blurred but whose presence spoke volumes. Liam blinked hard, hoping it was a dream, a prank, some twisted manipulation, but the second video confirmed it wasn't. There she was again, kissing the man, her hands tangled in his hair, her eyes closed in intimacy. The third and fourth clips only deepened the dagger. His wife, the woman he had held under fairy lights just hours ago, was captured in undeniable closeness with someone else. His hand slipped. The phone crashed against the wall with a sickening crack, and the rage that surged in his chest was unlike anything he had ever known. He screamed, a raw, broken cry that no one heard but the walls. His breaths came in short, fiery bursts, and tears, uninvited, burned down his face. Every ounce of trust he had built with Zara collapsed like a fragile house of cards in a storm. His knees buckled and he dropped to the bed, haunted by the contrast between her gentle whispers of love last night and the woman in the videos. How could she smile like that with someone else? How could she lie in his arms while her heart belonged elsewhere? Confusion blurred his thoughts, and anger blinded his logic. When Zara stepped out of the bathroom moments later, wrapped in a towel and humming, her face glowing from the night's affection, she found him standing at the foot of the bed, rigid, hollow, eyes cold and distant. She paused, sensing the shift, but before she could speak, he raised his hand, silencing her. "Don't say a word," he snapped, his voice cracking with venom and hurt. "I saw everything." Her smile faded instantly, her towel trembling in her grasp. "What are you talking about?" she asked, eyes wide with fear. "The videos," he barked. "You betrayed me. I gave you my name, my heart, and you gave yourself to someone else." Zara's face went pale as she rushed toward him, her words stumbling out. "Liam, it's not what you think. I can explain. Please." But he recoiled from her touch like it burned. His heart was too shattered to receive explanations. "Save your lies," he hissed, storming toward the closet, throwing her things into a suitcase with no care, no mercy. She cried, reaching for his hands, trying to stop him, begging him to listen, but he flung the suitcase at her feet and pointed to the door. "You're done here. Our marriage is over. You disgust me," he spat, his voice trembling with betrayal and fury. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees, holding his legs, pleading for one moment of grace, 1 ounce of belief, but he shoved her away. "Get out!" he roared, opening the front door wide, exposing her pain to the morning light. "Liam, please don't do this," she cried, but the man she had kissed under the stars last night was gone, replaced by a stranger fueled by rage. He grabbed her arm and dragged her outside, throwing her suitcase after her. She tripped, and fell on the steps, scraping her elbow, her tears mixing with the blood. Still wrapped in her towel, she looked back at him, shattered, confused, broken. "At least tell me why," she whispered, voice trembling. But he didn't answer. He slammed the door in her face, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the quiet street. Inside the mansion, silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hollow, haunted. And in the corner of the hallway, hidden behind the pillar with a cup of coffee in her hand, stood Melanie. Her lips curved into the slightest, coldest smirk as she took a slow sip, her eyes following the broken woman on the steps. Her plan had worked. The queen had been dethroned, and the seeds of destruction were blooming exactly as she had hoped. The videos had been edited with precision. The man in the clips wasn't who Liam thought he was, and the moments had been twisted just enough to look damning. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that Zara was gone, out of his heart, out of his life. And for Melanie, that was the first step toward getting everything she had ever wanted. As Melanie turned away with that chilling smirk, the front door slammed behind Zara, leaving an echo that rang louder than any scream. She stood on the cold marble steps in her bridal nightgown, barefoot, trembling, and drenched in heartbreak, while snowflakes began falling gently, mocking the warmth she once believed she had found. Her sobs went unanswered as the mansion lights dimmed behind her, shutting her out of the only dream she ever dared to believe in. Clutching the silk fabric close to her chest, she wandered through the streets of New York like a ghost, her once bright eyes dulled by betrayal, her heart dragging behind her like a forgotten piece of luggage. The cold seeped through her bones, but nothing could match the icy silence that Liam had left in her soul. With nowhere to go and no family to turn to, since her relatives had already disowned her for marrying outside her culture, Zara found herself in a corner of a park bench, hugging herself under a flickering lamppost as joggers passed her by, some glancing, most ignoring. Hunger clawed at her stomach like regret, but the pain of being discarded like trash hurt far more than any pang food could soothe. On the third night, a kind older woman from a shelter offered her a sandwich and a place to sleep. Zara resisted at first, pride still clinging to her bruised identity, but eventually surrendered to the warmth of human kindness, collapsing into the thin cot at the women's shelter, finally allowing herself to cry until morning. Days turned to weeks as she washed dishes, helped clean bathrooms, and braided other women's hair just to repay the shelter's kindness. But one morning, while scrubbing the floor, she paused as a sharp pain curled in her abdomen like a warning bell. She brushed it off until it happened again, stronger, deeper. Panic set in as she remembered how late her cycle was. Heart thudding, she borrowed a coat and took a bus to a community clinic, sitting in the waiting room like a faded flower among strangers. When the nurse finally called her in, the sterile white walls felt like they were caving in. She lay back during the ultrasound, her palms sweaty and heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the whir of the machine, until the doctor broke the silence with a soft, almost amused tone. "Congratulations, you're pregnant, with triplets." Her eyes flew open as her breath caught, her vision blurring instantly. "Triplets?" The room spun. She shook her head, but the screen beside her showed 3 tiny heartbeats pulsing steadily like a symphony she wasn't ready to conduct. The doctor smiled, assuming joy, but Zara's soul was unraveling. Her body folded over, arms wrapped around herself, tears falling fast, not in celebration, but in shock, in terror, in loneliness so deep it echoed inside her womb. She could barely afford a bus ride. How would she raise 3 children? With no job, no roof of her own, no husband, and no understanding of why Liam believed such lies, how could she give life to 3 innocent souls when hers felt stolen? Every heartbeat on that screen was a reminder of the man who hadn't even allowed her to explain, the man who discarded her like she meant nothing, the man whose betrayal had already destroyed her once. But in the midst of her grief, a subtle instinct flickered. She laid her palm on her belly, trembling, and whispered, "I don't know how, but I'll protect you." And that silent vow began to stitch the first thread of her new identity, not just as a woman scorned, but as a mother rising from ashes, unknown to a world that had turned its back on her. Liam sat in his office, staring blankly at the shattered phone screen he hadn't bothered to replace. Just like the pieces of his heart, he figured some things weren't worth fixing. The scent of salt water and memories clung to his skin from the weekend at the seaside resort, yet the warmth he'd once known with Zara had left his chest ice cold. Melanie moved through his life like a balm on a wound, gentle, present, and conveniently always within reach. She'd brought coffee without him asking, laughed at his jokes even when his smile didn't reach his eyes, and leaned in a little closer than necessary every time she adjusted his tie. He didn't resist. No, not because he was in love, but because he was tired of drowning alone. That Friday evening, as dusk painted New York City in muted gold, Melanie touched his arm and whispered, "Let me take you away for a while. Just you and me." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next morning, they were on a private plane, headed to Montauk. Melanie booked a luxury suite with ocean views and rooms that smelled of roses and reckless choices. The first night, Liam stood at the balcony, watching the waves while holding a glass of whiskey tighter than her hand. She came behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and whispered sweet nothings that never quite filled the void Zara left behind. Yet when they kissed, he let it happen. When they made love under crisp white sheets and flickering candlelight, he closed his eyes, not out of passion, but to block out the face that haunted him. Melanie's touch was practiced, purposeful and full of want, but Liam's soul remained quiet, indifferent. In public, they looked like a power couple, smiling, laughing, sipping champagne. But in private, he often fell silent, staring into space while Melanie tiptoed around the truth. He hadn't truly chosen her. She told herself otherwise. On the second night, back in the penthouse where Zara's laughter once echoed off the walls, Melanie wore red silk and played soft jazz, humming along as she poured wine and dimmed the lights. "To new beginnings," she toasted. Liam raised his glass slowly, but inside it felt more like an ending. Their lips met again, more urgently, more hungrily. But even in the heat of the moment, Zara's name flickered like a ghost in the corners of his mind. Afterward, as Melanie lay on his chest, tracing lazy circles, she whispered, "You deserve someone who won't lie to you." Liam's jaw clenched. The betrayal still burned. The videos had replayed in his head 100 times, and every time he convinced himself it was all real, that Zara had cheated. That her tears were fake, that her pain was guilt. Melanie fed that narrative with silence and sympathy, never once denying it, never once encouraging him to forgive. She didn't have to. Her presence became his escape. Her bed became his refuge. But his soul never came back from the storm. He stopped mentioning Zara's name, but his eyes still searched for her in every crowd, every model, every quiet moment. Melanie started leaving her perfume in his closet, her lipstick on his wine glass, her earrings on his nightstand, tiny victories in a war she never declared. And though Liam let her stay, let her touch, let her breathe beside him, he never once said, "I love you." Because deep down, beneath the rage, beneath the betrayal, beneath the broken vows, there was a question he refused to ask. What if I was wrong? But guilt is a coward. It dresses itself in distractions, covers itself with passion, and speaks in the voice of people who benefit from your blindness. Melanie knew. Every time Liam looked away during dinner, every time he sighed in the middle of a kiss, every time he poured another drink after midnight, she knew Zara's ghost was still in that penthouse. But she played the long game. She nestled herself deeper into his routine. She showed up with fresh files, homemade cookies, and smiles that masked manipulation. The world saw a grieving man finding love again. Only Liam knew he wasn't healing. He was hiding. And as summer days turned into colder nights, his dreams turned darker. He'd wake with Zara's name on his lips, drenched in sweat, searching for eyes that were no longer there. Melanie would pull him close, kiss his forehead, and whisper, "You're safe now." But safe didn't mean whole. Safe didn't mean right. And deep down, beneath the lies he clung to and the lips he kissed to forget, a storm still brewed, and the truth, still buried, was quietly preparing to erupt. 5 years later, the world that once shattered around Zara had transformed into something quieter, steadier, and strangely beautiful. Gone were the silk sheets and champagne mornings, replaced by early alarm clocks, crayon-stained walls, and the giggles of 3 little boys who looked so much like their father. It sometimes took her breath away. The boys, Ezra, Elias, and Emmanuel, were her world now, each with piercing blue eyes and thick curls that refused to be tamed, as if Liam's presence lingered in their genes, haunting her in the most beautiful way. They were loud, messy, curious, and full of laughter that echoed through their modest apartment like a healing balm. Her days began before the sun rose, packing 3 small lunch boxes, tying tiny shoelaces, wiping sleepy faces, and whispering morning prayers over each child's forehead. She had no nanny, no help, no family, just her and them. She worked as a school teacher at a small public school, teaching literature and life skills to children who often carried heartbreak in their eyes. And every day, she walked to work with her chin up and her heart stitched together by sheer willpower. The pain of her past didn't vanish. It simply folded itself into her bones like quiet scars she carried with grace. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, when all 3 boys lay sprawled across her mattress like little kings who had conquered their world of bedtime stories and warm milk, Zara would sit at the edge of the bed and cry silently, not out of regret, but for all the things her children would never know. Their father's voice, his smile, the way he once looked at her like she was his universe. She never spoke Liam's name to them, never filled their hearts with the bitterness that still clung to her memories like thorns. She simply told them their father was far away and that he had loved them once, somewhere in a time they couldn't remember. Each boy had developed his own little personality. Ezra was gentle and inquisitive, always asking questions about stars and angels. Elias was bold and fiercely protective of his brothers, often stepping in like a little man whenever danger threatened. And Emmanuel, the youngest by just minutes, was the artist, always drawing stick figures of Mama and us on any scrap of paper he found. Their home was small, with chipped paint and squeaky doors, but it was filled with joy that couldn't be bought. Zara decorated the place with hand-me-down furniture and dollar store frames that held pictures of moments she treasured. First steps, birthday cakes with too many candles, and laughter frozen in time. Every evening she would gather them around her, their feet dangling off the couch, and tell stories, not fairy tales but real stories of bravery, kindness, and dreams coming true. She wanted them to grow with courage, not resentment. She made peace with the betrayal she endured, though it still ached when she saw couples at the park or stumbled upon Liam's face on a magazine cover at the grocery store. He was still famous, still rich, still beautiful, still untouchable. She sometimes wondered if he ever thought about her, or the 3 pieces of himself that ran around a dusty playground on the other side of town. But she didn't allow that wondering to linger. She had no time to dwell in what-ifs. Her boys needed her whole, not half lost in sorrow. On weekends, she took them to the library, where they lost themselves in books and dreams. On Sundays, they all wore their best thrifted clothes and walked hand in hand to church, where the pastor always looked at Zara with silent admiration. No one knew her full story. No one knew about the mansion she once lived in, the man who left her broken, or the child she once carried while being dragged through the mud of humiliation. All they saw was a strong woman who smiled with her eyes, whose laugh echoed like sunshine, and who always said, "Thank you, Eve," and when life gave her very little. And in her solitude, Zara had found something powerful: freedom. She wasn't waiting for a man to come save her. She had become her own savior. She had built her own kingdom with nothing but love, sweat, and sacrifice. But deep down, buried beneath the strength and survival, was a flicker of hope she couldn't extinguish. A whisper that maybe one day truth would come to light. That maybe, somewhere across the city skyline, the man who once shattered her would see the shadows of 3 small boys and feel the weight of what he lost. Until then, she would continue, one step at a time, one prayer at a time. She was the mother of 3 miracles, and though the world had once turned its back on her, she had risen, not as a victim, but as a warrior cloaked in grace. And every time her sons looked into her eyes and called her Mama, it was a reminder that love could grow even from ashes. 5 years had passed since Zara, now a resilient single mother of 3, chose to rise from the ashes of betrayal and heartbreak. Her life had stabilized in quiet strength, but far away from her world, Liam Carter's name once again dominated headlines. "Billionaire Liam Carter set to marry longtime secretary," the news screamed, flashing Melanie Smith's surgically perfected smile across every social screen. The wedding was the kind that fairy tales envied, set in a historical French chateau draped in velvet florals, chandeliers hung like frozen stars, and violins wept in harmony as guests in glittering gowns arrived in sleek black limousines. Melanie glided through the venue like royalty, dripping in diamonds and smug triumph, clinking champagne glasses while reporters praised her grace under pressure. But beneath her expensive gown and flawless makeup, she felt something, a flicker of fear. Meanwhile, Liam, looking polished but pensive, stood before a mirror adjusting his tuxedo, haunted by Zara's face in the corners of his mind. He told himself this was love, safe, predictable, respectable. But deep inside there was an ache that no music or money could muffle. As he took his vows, Melanie beamed, yet her grip on his hand felt desperate. She had won the war, or had she? Because just as the priest uttered the final blessing and the couple turned to the applauding crowd, a gentle summer breeze blew open the grand hall's double doors. Liam froze. His breath caught, not from joy, but unease. He scanned the crowd as if sensing a shadow, something incomplete. Melanie squeezed his hand tighter, trying to anchor him, but his eyes were distant. That night, during the reception, while laughter echoed and champagne poured endlessly, Liam stepped out onto the balcony alone. The stars above were beautiful, but they reminded him of another night, years ago, when fairy lights danced above a different woman's smile. He whispered Zara's name under his breath, and the guilt hit him like a freight train. Behind him, Melanie watched silently through the glass, her jaw tightening. She had everything, yet she felt his soul slipping away. Liam returned to the dance floor, kissed her cheek for the cameras, but the spark was hollow, staged. Even as fireworks painted the night sky, he felt numb. Somewhere, his heart still lived in a candle-lit room, where a woman in a silk gown had once whispered dreams against his chest. And though he wore a ring again, the circle was incomplete. Fate, it seemed, wasn't finished with him yet. The wedding crasher, the hush in the grand cathedral was so still it felt like the air had forgotten how to breathe. Chandeliers sparkled, violins played softly, and white roses adorned every pillar as Melanie clutched her bouquet, her fingers tightening around the stems. The priest raised his hand to begin the vows when, without warning, the massive wooden doors creaked open at the back. A gust of wind fluttered down the aisle. He followed by silence so thick it seemed time itself paused. Every head turned. There, framed by the glowing afternoon sun, stood a woman whose elegance stole the breath from every chest. Zara. Not the broken girl who had once walked away with tears in her eyes, but a queen who had endured fire and emerged gleaming like gold. Her emerald dress flowed like silk over her curves, her hair braided in a crown around her head, eyes fierce with grace. But what silenced the crowd wasn't just her presence. It was what she brought. On each side of her, 2 little boys clung to her hands, and a third walked slightly behind, holding her clutch bag in one hand and looking around with curious wonder. Their skin shimmered in warm brown tones, their jet-black curls tousled, and their piercing blue eyes matched one man in that room, Liam Carter. Gasps broke out, phones lifted, guests whispered and blinked in disbelief, unable to take their eyes off the carbon copies of the groom. Melanie's smile vanished. Her grip loosened. Liam turned slowly, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. When his eyes landed on the trio, his soul was yanked from the comfort of illusion to the cruel truth he had buried for years. Zara met his gaze. No hatred, No tears, only a calm that screamed of battles fought in silence. Her lips didn't tremble. Her steps didn't falter. She walked steadily down the aisle, the boys following beside her like three little warriors. One clutched a miniature dinosaur, another dragged a school bag decorated with stars, and the youngest, no more than 4, stared up at the chandeliers as if he'd just entered a palace from his dreams. Liam's jaw clenched, his breathing hitched. He stumbled back a step, colliding with the altar. Melanie whispered, "What is happening?" But he didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the children, their matching eyes, their familiar scowls, their confident strides. Zara stopped halfway down the aisle. The Carthy, Dral, was frozen in disbelief. "I wasn't invited," she said softly, her voice carrying power despite its calm tone. "But I thought the father of my children deserved to know they exist before he vows himself to lies again." The words shattered the air. Melanie's face drained of colour. She turned to Liam, her fingers shaking. "Is this true?" she whispered. But Liam said nothing. He couldn't. His heart was a battleground. "They're mine?" he asked, voice hoarse. Zara nodded. "Every heartbeat, every breath, every sleepless night. Yours, Liam. All of it." His knees buckled slightly. He gripped the edge of a pew. The eldest boy stared at him, puzzled. "Is that the man from the photo in Mama's drawer?" he asked innocently. Zara gently squeezed his hand, silently signaling him to stay quiet. Melanie's tears were not of heartbreak, but fear, rage, exposure. "She planned this," she shouted. "She wants to ruin us." Zara turned to her finally. "I don't want your groom," she said coldly. "I wanted the truth to walk these halls for once. I came so my sons would never have to ask why their father stood at another altar without ever knowing they existed." One of the twins looked up at Liam and smiled, a shy, hesitant smile that made something crack wide open inside his chest. "Do you know my name?" he asked. Liam's eyes filled with tears. "No, I don't," he whispered. "I never got the chance." Zara blinked slowly, holding back emotion. "He's Caleb. The middle one is Jaden. And the youngest, who still sleeps with a lion plush toy, is Noah." Liam stepped forward, arms slightly trembling. Can I talk to them?" he asked, almost begging. Melanie pulled him back. "Are you serious?" she shrieked. "She shows up with these kids and you suddenly believe her?" Liam turned, finally seeing her, not as the polished woman in white, but as the manipulative architect of everything he lost. "Hear my sons, Melanie," he said quietly, firmly. "I can see it in their faces, in their eyes. You knew. You kept this from me." Melanie's mouth dropped open, guilt racing across her features. Zara's hands trembled, but she didn't falter. She had waited for this, for the truth to stand, unshaken. "I begged your family to let me speak to you. I wrote letters. They were all returned. I sat outside your office for days, holding 2 newborns. Your assistant threatened to call security. I bled in silence. I healed in struggle, but I never lied." The church remained dead silent, the priest quietly closing his Bible. The ceremony was no longer a celebration. It had become a revelation. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper airplane, offering it to Liam. "I made this for you, just in case I ever saw you," he said. Liam took it with shaking hands. His tears fell freely now. "You made this for me?" he whispered. Caleb nodded. "Mama says you used to fly me around the living room when I was a baby." Liam choked on a sob. "I did. I really did." Zara gently wiped Noah's nose and whispered something in his ear. The boy nodded and walked up to Liam, handing him a tiny stuffed lion. "You can hold it, if you're sad," he said, childlike and pure. Liam collapsed to his knees, clutching the toy, the paper airplane, and the weight of 5 lost years. Zara turned. She had said what she came to say. Her job wasn't to humiliate, but to reveal. She signaled the boys to follow, and slowly they began walking back toward the doors. "Zara, wait," Liam begged. "Please don't leave again." She paused but didn't turn around. "I never left. You locked the door." With that, she continued walking, heels clicking softly against marble floors, 3 boys beside her, the image of strength and resilience and truth. Melanie's sobs rang out, but nobody comforted her. The guests remained stunned. Liam stood rooted, staring at the doors long after they closed, wondering how he could ever reclaim what he threw away so easily. Liam remained frozen on his knees, the weight of the moment crashing down like an avalanche. His vision blurred as he stared at the 3 boys, carbon copies of himself, standing beside the woman he had once banished. The church was silent except for the quiet murmur of shocked guests and the occasional click of a camera. Melanie stood at the altar, trembling, her face drained of all color, clutching her bouquet like a lifeline. Zara, dressed in a flowing emerald gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, kept her head high as she guided the boys closer to their father. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of destiny. The boys, curious yet composed, looked up at the man they had only seen in photos their mother had hidden for years. One of them, the boldest, tugged at Liam's tie and asked softly, "Are you our daddy?" The question shattered Liam's defenses. He collapsed forward, his arms instinctively wrapping around them, sobbing openly as decades of masculinity and pride dissolved in a storm of guilt and realization. Zara stood silently above them, her eyes glassy but proud. She had envisioned this moment 1,000 times, but reality hurt deeper than fantasy ever warned. Melanie, still unmoving, finally found her voice. A shrill gasp of denial followed by a hollow laugh as she dropped her bouquet. "This can't be happening," she whispered, stumbling backward. "You said she cheated. You swore she was a liar." Liam, still cradling one of the boys, looked up at her, his face wrecked with grief. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I destroyed her, and I destroyed us." Gasps echoed through the hall, whispers rushing like wind through a wheat field. Journalists near the back scribbled furiously. Guests exchanged stunned looks. Zara finally spoke, her voice calm but cutting. "You believed a lie, Lee. You believed the worst about me without ever asking me once. And you let her," she pointed toward Melanie, "ruin a family before it even had a chance to begin." Melanie stepped forward, her heels clacking with sharpness against the marble. "You're just bitter," she spat. "You're trying to ruin my wedding out of spite." Zara didn't flinch. "If I wanted to ruin your wedding, I'd have done it 5 years ago with a court case and a DNA test. I came today because my sons deserve the truth. They deserve to know who their father is." One of the boys looked up again, his voice breaking the thick silence. "Mom said you were a good man," he told Liam. "She said you made a bad choice but weren't a bad person." Liam wept harder, pulling the child into his arms. "I don't deserve that kind of mercy," he whispered, "but I'll spend the rest of my life earning it." The priest stepped back uncertainly, glancing between the bridal party and the unexpected guests. Melanie stormed toward Liam, grabbing his shoulder. "You're going to throw everything away for her? For this circus?" Liam stood slowly, releasing the children and squaring his shoulders. His face had shifted, guilt still present but now joined by a calm resolve. "This is not a circus. These are my children. This is my truth." Zara's lip trembled, but she stood firm. Melanie let out a hysterical laugh. "So that's it? 5 years all for nothing?" Liam turned toward her, his expression gentler than she expected. "You helped me through a dark time, but it was built on a lie. I can't go through with this." Melanie's mouth opened to argue, but no words came. Her world unraveled beneath her designer heels. Without another word, she turned and stormed out of the church, the massive doors slamming behind her. Reporters swarmed to capture the scandal, flashes popping like fireworks. Liam looked down at his sons again, 3 young faces full of innocence and questions. "What are your names?" he asked. His voice cracked but warm. The eldest answered, "I'm Zion. He's Zayden, and he's Zaire." Liam nodded slowly, repeating each name like a sacred chant. Zara watched him, a war raging inside her between the pain he caused and the healing she never thought she'd see. "They've asked about you every birthday," she said quietly. "I never painted you as a villain. I just didn't have the truth to give them." Liam approached her slowly. "And now I don't know how to earn your forgiveness, or theirs. But if there's any part of your heart that still remembers who I used to be, I want to try." Zara looked away, blinking back tears. "It's not about us anymore, Liam. It's about them, about the men they'll become." He nodded solemnly. "Then let me start there, as their father." The triplets instinctively circled around their parents, sensing something powerful was happening. Guests began to applaud softly, not because the wedding had been saved, but because a broken truth had finally come to light. The priest cleared his throat awkwardly. "Shall we continue with the ceremony?" Liam shook his head. "This ceremony is over, but a new one is just beginning." He looked down at his sons. "Let's go home." Zara turned to him, hesitant. "Home?" He looked at her with deep sincerity. "Wherever you are, wherever they are, that's where I want to be." And for the first time in years, something in Zara allowed her to hope. Not for the man Liam used to be, but the father he was ready to become. Together, they walked out of the church, not as husband and wife, but as a family reborn from ash, carrying the weight of yesterday and the fragile promise of tomorrow. Liam remained on his knees, trembling, his eyes darting between the three boys whose piercing blue eyes mirrored his own and the woman whose love he had once taken for granted. Zara stood tall, her posture regal, but her eyes were red from years of holding back oceans of pain. Her voice was steady, yet every word carried the weight of broken years. "You never gave me a chance to speak, Liam," she said softly, but her tone struck like thunder across the silent church. "You believed a lie without ever looking me in the eyes and asking me the truth. You chose betrayal over trust." The murmurs in the crowd began to rise, confusion spreading like wildfire, but Zara raised a hand, commanding silence as she pulled a stack of papers from her clutch. "These," she said, unfolding them, "are the results of a DNA test. 3 of them, each confirming what you already know in your gut. These boys are yours." The crowd gasped again. Liam's mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands trembled as he reached for the documents, scanning them with panicked eyes. I didn't know," he muttered, voice cracking, breath short. "I thought you cheated. I saw the videos." "Faked," Zara interrupted, turning her head slowly toward Melanie. "Do you want to tell him, or should I?" Melanie, who had remained frozen in her pristine white wedding dress, looked like a ghost now, pale, stiff, exposed. Her lips trembled as guilt consumed her. "Liam," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared of losing you. You were drifting away from me, and I knew you still loved her. I couldn't compete with that." "You sent the videos," Liam said, rising slowly to his feet, his face tightening with disbelief and dawning horror. "You edited them. You made me believe Zara cheated. You destroyed my marriage?" Melanie's eyes welled with tears. "I loved you. I thought if I showed you something horrible, you'd finally let her go." Zara laughed bitterly, not out of joy, but exhaustion. "You never loved him," she said to Melanie. "You loved having him. Possession, power. That's not love." Liam turned to Zara, every inch of him pleading for mercy, but she stepped back. "Do you know what it felt like?" "Keys," he whispered. "To be thrown out of the house the day after our wedding, to be accused of betrayal on the same night I gave you my everything. I was homeless, Liam, alone, pregnant. I gave birth without you. I raised our sons without you, and every night I prayed you'd come back. But instead, I saw headlines about you and her, about your vacations, your parties, Your glamorous life while I struggled to feed your children." Liam's face crumbled, tears now streaming down his cheeks, the weight of his choices pressed into his soul like boulders. "I didn't know. I didn't. I failed you. I failed them." The triplets watched silently, sensing the storm of emotions crashing between the adults, too young to understand but wise enough to feel. One of the boys stepped forward, tugging at Zara's dress. "Is he our daddy?" he asked, his innocent voice slicing through the tension like a blade. Zara's lips quivered as she nodded slowly. Liam knelt again, this time not in shock, but in humility. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered. "But if I could go back—" "You can't," Zara said sharply. "What's broken isn't just us, Liam. It's trust. It's memories that can't be erased. It's birthdays missed, first steps you never saw, tears I wiped alone, nights I sang them to sleep with an aching heart." Melanie began sobbing uncontrollably now, stepping back from the altar, her bouquet falling to the marble floor with a soft thud. She realized this wasn't her victory. It was her exposure. Her obsession had created an illusion, but truth had shattered it. A silence filled the grand hall, but it wasn't peace. It was grief, disappointment, shattered pride. Liam looked at his sons one by one, memorizing their faces, each feature a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Now," Zara repeated. "Now I take my sons and walk away, again, but this part is time. I walk with my head high." "You don't get to erase the past, Liam. You live with it. You mourn it. And maybe, someday, if you prove yourself, not to me, but to them, maybe they'll forgive you. But not today." She turned, the train of her elegant gown trailing behind like a banner of triumph and pain. Her sons took her hands. As they reached the church doors, one of them looked back. "Bye, Daddy," he said quietly. Liam's knees gave out again, the weight of the moment crushing him. Melanie remained rooted in place, abandoned at the altar, her fairy tale wedding turned into a grave of lies. Reporters had stopped filming, too stunned or perhaps too moved to intrude. Guests whispered, some with sympathy for Zara, others in judgment of Liam. But Zara didn't hear any of them. She walked toward the sunlight with her boys, her heels clicking confidently on the floor like a victory march. Liam watched her vanish through the doors, carrying away not just the truth, but the life he could have had. Should have had. Alone at the altar, with the scent of white lilies now sickening rather than sweet, Liam closed his eyes, replaying every moment he dismissed, every doubt he allowed to grow, every lie he believed without question. Tears and truths, Zara had said, and now both flooded his soul. Liam dropped to his knees, still stunned from Zara's confession and Melanie's exposed deceit, his heart a storm of guilt, shame, and shattered illusions. He clutched his chest, as if the weight of 5 lost years had suddenly crashed onto him, pressing harder with each breath. And in a voice that trembled like a broken violin, he whispered, "Zara, I'm sorry. I was wrong." His tears spilled freely, mixing with the polished marble floor as the world around him blurred. The crowd faded, the grand church dimmed, and all he could see were the 3 boys, standing by their mother like little soldiers of truth, innocence, and pain. The echoes of the past haunted him. The wedding, that night he abandoned her, the cruel silence he never dared to break, the lies he believed, and the love he buried under pride and manipulation. Zara stood tall in front of him, her posture regal, her eyes fierce yet hurt, wearing not just a dress, but the armor of a woman who had risen from ashes to protect her sons. Her voice, calm yet resolute, struck through the silence. "Liam, regret doesn't fix what you destroyed." Her boys clung to her hands, their curious gazes flickering between the broken man on his knees and the mother who had become their world. "I begged for you to believe me once," she continued, her eyes glistening, "but you chose whispers over my truth. You chose comfort over confrontation. You married betrayal while I bled in silence." Liam sobbed harder, crawling closer, his hands trembling as they reached for hers, but she stepped back, gently, with dignity, shaking her head. "Don't," she said, "because I've already walked through fire and built a home out of embers. My sons know love, honesty, and resilience. They know their mother never bowed to injustice." Liam looked at the boys again, now realizing that every feature, those eyes, that stubborn jawline, the way the youngest twisted his lips in confusion, mirrored him. They were not just his blood. They were the life he missed, the birthdays he never sang for, the scraped knees he never kissed, the bedtime stories he never told. "I want to know them," he pleaded, his voice a rasp. "I want to be a father. I want to be what I should have been from the start." But Zara's heart, though aching, stayed guarded. "They don't need your guilt, Liam," she replied softly. "They need stability. They need truth. And most of all, they need someone who won't walk away when things get hard." Melanie, now exposed and disgraced, stood silently in the background, her dream wedding reduced to a cold mess of flowers, pity, and ruin. No one looked at her anymore. No one pitied her tears. She had poisoned a love she never owned, and now the consequences danced before her eyes in the form of 3 innocent faces and 1 broken man. Liam slowly stood, wiped his tears, and took a step back as if accepting the sentence he knew he deserved. The crowd still watched in stunned silence as Zara walked past him, chin raised, grace in every stride, her boys walking proudly at her side, each a testimony of survival, each a living echo of a love that once burned bright and was smothered too soon. As they reached the grand doors, the light outside painted them in gold, almost divine, as if the universe itself blessed their exit. Liam turned to watch them leave, his heart splintering with every step they took away from him, and just before she stepped out, Zara turned slightly, her voice the final nail in his remorse. "You abandoned us once, Liam. I won't let you break them now." And with that, the doors closed behind her, not with anger, but with finality, with strength, and with the quiet triumph of a woman who had found her worth beyond a man's apology. 6 months had passed since Zara walked out of that church with her head held high and her triplets beside her, not just as a woman scorned, but as a woman reborn from the ashes of betrayal, standing tall with dignity, grace, and a fire in her spirit that no storm could ever extinguish. In that time, she poured every ounce of pain, strength, and resilience into building something she once only dreamed of, her own modeling agency. But this wasn't just another business run by a beautiful face. It was a movement, a vision brought to life by a woman who had tasted heartbreak, rejection, and abandonment, yet chose not to become bitter, but better. Zara Rises became the name etched in bold letters across the city's skyline, plastered on billboards and magazines, a symbol of empowerment, especially for women of color who were often overlooked, underestimated, and silenced. Her agency didn't chase traditional beauty standards. Instead, it shattered them, celebrating stretch marks, melanin-rich skin, natural curls, full figures, and unfiltered stories. Women from all walks of life lined up at her door, single mothers, abuse survivors, disabled queens, girls who had been told, "You're not enough." And Zara told each one, "You are more than enough. You are art." The media called her the phoenix of fashion, but for her, it wasn't about fame. It was about healing, about creating a safe space she never had when the world turned its back on her. Her boys, now 6, often visited the office after school, giggling as they watched their mother command boardrooms, direct shoots, and sign contracts with poise. They called her Supermom, unaware of just how literal that title truly was. One rainy afternoon, as Zara sat near her office window reviewing campaign photos of 3 curvy, cocoa-skinned models laughing barefoot in a meadow, her assistant walked in quietly with an envelope. It was Liam's handwriting. She stared at it for a moment, memories flooding back of the man who once held her like she was treasure, then discarded her like she was poison. With a deep breath, she opened it. The letter read, "Zara, I see you now, truly see you. I wish I had seen you when it mattered. Watching you from afar is both my punishment and my honor. You are everything I failed to understand. Even if I lost you, I hope the world never does. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read the words, not from sadness, but from the quiet acknowledgement that the boy who once abandoned her had finally become the man she once needed. Too late for her, but perhaps not too late for himself. She didn't cry. She smiled, not because she still loved him, but because she had learned to love herself far more. That night, at a gala celebratis, named Diversity in Fashion, Zara walked the red carpet in a champagne gold gown, her sons flanking her sides in matching tuxedos, their heads held high just like hers. Cameras flashed, voices called her name, but her eyes were only on her boys, the very miracles the world once told her to hide. One journalist asked, "Zara, what do you say to women watching you who are going through what you went through?" She paused thoughtfully, then replied, "You're not broken. You're in bloom. Don't wait for someone else to validate your worth. Create your own crown." Applause erupted, but Zara kept walking, her feet steady, her heart full. Later that evening, as her sons curled beside her in bed, one of them whispered, "Mama, are you happy now?" She looked at their innocent eyes, so much like Liam's, yet untouched by his mistakes, and said softly, "Yes, baby. I didn't just survive. I conquered." As they drifted to sleep under the soft glow of her success, Zara knew this was more than a happy ending. It was a new beginning, authored by a woman who had once been broken but never bowed, silenced but never erased. She had become her own rescue story, and now the world would remember her not as the woman who had been abandoned, but as the woman who rose again, and this time for good.